We're going to talk about integers and opposites and absolute value. So let's get started. First, we're going to have a definition of the word integer. So integer means whole. An integer is a number that is part of the set of whole numbers and their opposites. Some examples of integers are 0. 0 is an integer because it is a whole number. A number like 4 or 19, those are all integers because they're whole numbers, but also the opposites of whole numbers like -10, -75. So as long as it is a whole number or its opposite, it is an integer. So since integers are whole numbers and their opposites, it's important for us to know what the word opposite means. So here's an example of a situation with opposites. Alexis was shopping on the ground floor of a mall when she realized she had left her phone in her car. So she walks down 6 flights to her car in the underground parking garage. So Alexis had parked 6 levels underground. She had to walk up 6 sets of stairs and then walk back down 6 sets of stairs. So she had to walk 6 sets in opposite directions. So that would be an example of opposites. So a definition of opposite, and you can write this on your paper off in the margin. Opposites are numbers that are in the opposite positions on the number line where one is negative and one is positive. So an example of opposites might be -6 and I'm not going to put a comma, I'm going to write the word and 6. So -6 and 6 are opposites because they're on opposite sides of the number line. They're on opposite sides of zeros. Opposites are the same distance from 0. So I'm going to write that down as a sentence to keep. Okay, so now we have a definition of opposite. Now let's look at ways that we can represent situations using integers. So here's a situation. Xavier climbs up an apple tree, 9 feet up an apple tree. What integer represents the direction and how far he will climb to go back down to the ground? So I'm going to put above this sentence here. If he climbs 9 feet up, that would be +9. Now, I don't normally have to write the positive symbol because it's implied in a number. If it just has nothing, it's positive. So then what integer would I use to clarify that I'm talking about him going down 9 feet? So then I would write for his trip down would be -9. It goes on to ask, what does 0 represent in this situation? So in this particular situation, 0 would represent the ground level. So we're saying if we're starting on the ground level and we go up 9 feet, that's +9. If he comes down 9 feet, that's -9. So Marcus is now diving and he's going to go 18 meters below sea level. What integer represents his location relative to the surface? So since he's 18 meters below sea level, that would be a -18. So we're looking for keywords here like up, down, below, above. These are all keywords letting us know whether we're talking about a positive or a negative. So how far would he have to travel to return to the surface? He would have to travel 18 meters to get back to the surface. Because in order, just like with the apple tree, just like with Alexis and her car, you need to go the same distance but in the opposite direction. So when you combine those things, when you're combining them, if he travels 18 meters below the surface, he would need to travel up 18 meters to get back to the surface. So those two trips are being combined to make 0. So another way to define opposites are two numbers whose sum is 0. That would be another definition for opposites. So if we use this fact that the sum of a number and its opposite is 0, then we're going to explore this situation. Which of these situations can be represented with an integer that, when combined with the opposite of 8, makes 0? So let's just fix this a little bit to make it a little more clear. So rather than leaving this as when combined with, and then all of this right here, the opposite of 8, instead of reading that as the opposite of 8, let's read it as what the opposite of 8 is. Let's write this as -8 because that is the opposite of 8. So let's look at this question again. Which of these situations can be represented with an integer that, when combined with -8, makes 0? So what integer are we looking for? Well, what integer can we combine with -8 and the result will be 0? So what number goes here? Well, we're looking for the integer that is actually 8. So we're looking to see which of these scenarios could be reflected by 8. So as you read them, pause and read them and see if you could pick the right ones. There's more than one. So here's the correct answers. I've highlighted the word, circled the word each time that really indicated that it was a positive 8. Rises, up, earn. These are all things that indicate a positive direction, whereas down, spend, they would be negative. So we're coming to our last part of the video, which is on absolute value. I have written and filled in the blanks here for the two things about the definition of absolute value that you need. Go ahead and copy them. Feel free to pause the video if you need to. So absolute value is the distance a number is from 0. Absolute value is always positive because distance cannot be negative. I shouldn't say 0. I'm sorry. Let's just say negative. My bad. Don't copy that. Whoops. Okay. Now, in order to indicate that we're trying to find the absolute value, we're going to use absolute value bars. So when you see absolute value bars like this, let's say I wrote, like, for example, here's an example. If I put these absolute value bars around the number -7, I would be saying the absolute value of -7. So you read it that way. When you see the absolute value bars, you read the absolute value of, and then whatever is inside them. If there's a negative on the outside, you'll read it as the opposite of. So a negative on the outside of parentheses or absolute value bars is read as the opposite of, and then whatever's inside. So finally, we have some practice here for absolute value. All of these are absolute value problems. And just a really quick check. So the absolute value of -5 would be 5 because -5 is 5 steps from 0. And the absolute value of +5 is also 5 because it's also 5 steps from 0. So it doesn't matter whether you're going right or left, it's just how far it is from 0. Whereas number 3, it's saying the opposite of the absolute value of 2. So the absolute value of 2 is just 2. And I'm going to take the opposite of that, so it's -2. So this is actually could be simplified to just -2. Number 4 is a little tricky. It's saying the opposite of, and then it's the opposite of the absolute value of -4. Well, the absolute value of -4 is what I take first. The absolute value of -4 is 4. And I'm going to take the opposite of that, which is -4. So the opposite of the absolute value of -4 is -4, which seems crazy because I'm saying the opposite and I say a negative here, but remember, I have to take the absolute value. So go ahead and finish the last 4 problems.